The first time I realized my life was about to change forever, I was standing in the dim hallway of my aunt's old house, holding a bag of my clothes and wondering why she had insisted I come stay with her for a while. My name is Armin. I'm 24 years old, and until that day I had been living in a small rented apartment across town, working as a junior accountant in a company that never really noticed me. I was quiet, methodical, and not the sort of person who drew attention. I had been dating Emma for almost 2 years, though our relationship had been going through a rough patch lately. She said I was too guarded, too afraid to open up, and that sometimes it felt like I was hiding a part of myself even from her. She wasn't wrong, but it wasn't a secret I could explain easily. My aunt, Samira, was Emma's mother's older sister, a woman in her late 40s with a sharp sense of style and an even sharper sense of people. She had been a constant presence in my life when I was a teenager, often inviting me to her home for dinners or family events. She had a way of making you feel as though she saw right through you, stripping away all the polite layers until you stood there exposed. When she called me 2 weeks ago, she said she had a proposition. She wouldn't tell me what it was over the phone, only that it could help me become the person I was meant to be. It sounded strange, but I was curious, and when she added that she'd heard from Emma about our troubles, I guessed she might be trying to offer some sort of advice. The first evening at her house felt warm enough, though there was an undercurrent of something I couldn't place. The rooms were decorated with soft, feminine touches, lace curtains, polished wood furniture, vases of fresh flowers. She cooked a dinner of spiced lamb and rice, poured me a glass of juice, and asked questions that dug deeper than I expected. "Do you like who you are, Armin?" she asked, leaning her chin on her hand. "Do you ever feel like you're playing a role someone else wrote for you?" I laughed it off at first, but she didn't. She told me she'd always suspected I was different, that there was a gentleness about me that the world didn't always reward, and that maybe it was time I stopped hiding it. That night I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, hearing her words over and over. The next morning, she knocked softly on my door. "Wear this today," she said, holding up a neatly pressed shirt, except it wasn't a man's shirt. It was a soft blush pink blouse with delicate buttons and sleeves that tapered at the wrist. I hesitated, confused, but she only smiled and said, "Trust me. It's just an experiment." I don't know why I didn't refuse outright. Maybe it was the way she said it, like she had already decided I would agree. I put it on, the fabric smooth against my skin, lighter than anything I owned. She appraised me from head to toe, then nodded with satisfaction. "We'll work on the rest," she murmured. Over the next few days, she kept adding to the experiment. A cardigan one morning, softer trousers another. She never forced me, but her tone made refusal feel awkward, as though I'd be disappointing her. By the end of the week, she presented me with a neatly wrapped box. Inside was a pale lavender dress. "This is the real test," she said, her eyes gleaming. My pulse raced, and I stammered something about how it wasn't really my style, but she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a gentle but firm whisper. "Armin, sometimes we discover ourselves by stepping into someone else's shoes. Or dress." The moment I slipped it on, I felt exposed in a way I'd never experienced, but also oddly aware of every movement I made. She adjusted the hem, brushed imaginary dust off the fabric, and led me to a mirror. The reflection staring back at me didn't feel entirely like a stranger. Samira studied me with that same knowing look, as if ticking off a box in her mind. "We'll need to do something about your hair," she said casually. "And your posture." Over tea that afternoon, she told me about her own youth, how she had been forced into certain roles she didn't want, how she had learned to craft her own identity. She spoke about strength in vulnerability, about embracing what others might see as weakness and turning it into beauty. Each conversation left me more unsettled, yet more intrigued. I began to notice small changes in myself, the way I held my hands, the way I moved through her house. My voice softened when I spoke to her. My steps became lighter. She noticed, of course, and encouraged it. Emma called once, her voice distant. I told her I was staying with Samira for a bit, and she didn't ask many questions. Part of me was relieved. I wasn't ready to explain. One evening, Samira suggested we try makeup. "Just for fun," she said, though there was an intensity in her gaze that told me she saw it as more than a game. She guided me to sit in front of her vanity, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating the array of brushes and palettes. As she worked, I watched my features change in the mirror, the faint shimmer on my eyelids, the subtle curve of color on my lips. I couldn't deny the strange thrill that came with each brushstroke. When she was done, she turned my chair to face her.
"Perfect," she said softly.
"You're starting to see it, aren't you?" I swallowed, unable to answer. That night, I barely slept. My mind was a tangle of questions and a quiet excitement I didn't want to name. The next day, she had an outfit laid out for me before I even woke: a flowing skirt, a fitted blouse, and a light scarf. I dressed without protest. It was easier now, almost natural. She told me we might have visitors later, but wouldn't say who. All day, I wondered what she meant, my nerves growing with each passing hour. As evening approached, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart thudded in my chest. Samira stood by the door, giving me a slow, approving smile. "Just remember," she said, "you're exactly who you're meant to be." The knock on the door came, sharp and sudden, and in that instant I realized I wasn't ready for anyone else to see me like this. But it was too late. Samira was already turning the knob. The door swung open, and in stepped a woman I didn't recognize at first, though she seemed immediately familiar with Samira. She was in her early 50s, with neatly styled hair and a warm smile that faltered slightly when her eyes landed on me. I froze, standing awkwardly in the skirt and blouse Samira had chosen, unsure if I should greet her or run back to the guest room. "This is my friend Shazia," Samira said casually, stepping aside to let her in. Shazia's gaze lingered on me, and there was a hint of curiosity there that made my face feel hot. "So this is your nephew," she said slowly, but it wasn't quite a question. Samira smiled, her tone deliberate. "Yes, though we've been working on helping him express his softer side." My stomach tightened. I wanted to protest, to explain that this was just something temporary, an odd experiment, but my voice wouldn't come. Shazia gave me a nod, her expression unreadable, and I mumbled a greeting. Samira ushered us into the living room where tea and biscuits were already set on the table. As they talked, I sat quietly, aware of every movement I made, every brush of the skirt against my legs. At one point, Shazia asked how long I'd been dressing like this. Before I could answer, Samira replied for me. "Not long, but he's a natural. You can see it, can't you?" Shazia smiled faintly, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. The conversation drifted to other topics, but I could feel Shazia glancing at me from time to time. When she finally left, Samira closed the door and turned to me with a look of satisfaction. "You did well," she said. "You didn't hide. You didn't shrink away. That's progress." I wasn't sure if I agreed, but a strange sense of pride stirred in me. The next morning, she announced we were going shopping. I tried to suggest I could just wear what I had, but she shook her head. "If we're going to do this properly, we need clothes that fit you perfectly." We drove to a boutique I'd never noticed before, tucked away on a quiet street. Inside, the air smelled faintly of perfume and new fabric. Racks of dresses, skirts, and blouses in soft colors and flowing materials lined the walls. Samira greeted the shopkeeper like an old friend, and soon I found myself in a changing room with a pile of clothes. "Try them all," she instructed from outside. I obeyed, slipping into each outfit, stepping out to let her appraise me. Some she rejected with a shake of her head, others she adjusted with a careful tug or pin. By the end, she had chosen several outfits, along with shoes and a small bag. As we were leaving, she surprised me by picking out a wig, a short, stylish cut in a deep brown shade. She handed it to me with a smile. "Just to see the full picture," she said. Back at the house, she had me put on one of the new dresses, the wig, and a touch of makeup. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The person staring back wasn't Armand, the quiet accountant. It was someone softer, more open, and yet oddly self-assured. Samira watched me with an approving smile. "This is closer to who you really are," she said. Over the next week, she had me dress like this every day. At first, it felt like a game I wasn't sure I wanted to play, but gradually it became routine. I started noticing the way fabrics felt against my skin, the way a certain color could change my mood. She began calling me by a different name, Areeba. At first, it made me blush, but soon I found myself responding to it without thinking. One afternoon, as I was helping her arrange flowers in the living room, Emma called again. I hesitated before answering, aware of the way I looked. Her voice was warm but cautious. "I miss you," she said, and I could tell she meant it. I told her I was fine, just busy with Samira's projects, and she didn't press for details. After we hung up, Samira gave me a knowing look. "You'll tell her when you're ready," she said. "But the longer you wait, the harder it will be." That night, I lay in bed wondering if she was right. Part of me feared Emma would never understand, but another part wondered if maybe she could. A few days later, Samira suggested we take a walk in the park. I froze at the idea of being seen in public, but she assured me it would be quiet this time of day. She was right. The park was nearly empty. Still, my heart pounded with every step, half expecting someone to recognize me. A jogger passed by, giving us a polite nod, and I realized with a rush of relief that no one seemed to care. Samira smiled at me like a proud teacher.
"See?
The world is far less interested in us than we think." But as we reached the park's exit, I spotted someone across the street, someone I recognized instantly. It was a co-worker from the accounting firm, walking in our direction. My breath caught in my throat. Samira noticed my panic, but didn't slow her pace. "Remember," she whispered, "you're Areeba right now. They won't see anyone else unless you let them." We passed each other with nothing more than a brief glance. My coworker didn't react, and I felt a dizzy mix of relief and exhilaration. That evening, Samira poured us both tea and said quietly, "I think you're ready for the next step." "What step?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, that same mysterious smile she'd worn since the beginning. "You'll find out tomorrow." I didn't sleep much that night, my mind racing with possibilities. The next morning, she laid out an outfit more elaborate than anything I'd worn before, a flowing dress with lace detailing, matching heels, and a delicate necklace. As I dressed, she brought out a small jewelry box and opened it to reveal a pair of pearl earrings. "These belong to my mother," she said softly. "If you wear them, you'll be carrying a part of my family's grace with you." I put them on, feeling their gentle weight, and something in her expression told me this was a turning point. She handed me a small clutch bag and said we had somewhere to be. When I asked where, she just smiled and told me I'd see soon enough. We drove for nearly half an hour before pulling up to a large house I didn't recognize. There were several cars parked outside, and I could hear faint music from inside. My heart thudded in my chest. "This isn't just another walk in the park, is it?" I asked. She shook her head, her eyes gleaming. "No, Areeba. This is where you show the world who you are." She took my hand and led me toward the door, and as it opened, the sound of voices and laughter spilled out into the evening air. The doorway framed a warm golden light spilling from chandeliers overhead, and I found myself stepping into a room filled with well-dressed people, their conversations weaving together in a soft hum. Samira's grip on my hand was steady, almost reassuring, but my heartbeat was pounding in my ears. I kept my chin lowered slightly, aware of the way my heels clicked on the polished floor, the way the lace hem of my dress brushed lightly against my legs. A few faces turned toward us, and I braced for that flicker of recognition, the sharp intake of breath that would mean someone had seen through me. But instead, there were only polite smiles, nods, and a few curious glances that quickly moved on. Samira introduced me to a small circle of her friends, calling me Areeba without hesitation. Each time she did, the name landed in my chest like a quiet challenge, and I found myself responding naturally. One woman complimented my dress, another admired the earrings, and I murmured thanks, my voice softer than I remembered it being. As the evening went on, I began to relax, though my senses stayed heightened. Every movement felt deliberate, the way I reached for a glass, the way I sat with my knees together, the careful turns of my head when someone addressed me. Samira stayed near, occasionally resting her hand lightly on my shoulder, an unspoken reminder that I was exactly where she wanted me to be. Halfway through the evening, she leaned in and whispered that she had someone she wanted me to meet. She led me toward an older gentleman near the piano, his posture straight, his gaze sharp but kind. "This is Mr. Khalid," she said. "He knew me when I was your age." Mr. Khalid smiled and told me I reminded him of someone he used to know, though he didn't say who. He asked polite questions about my interests, about my work, and I answered carefully, never slipping into details that might betray the truth. The conversation was going well until I heard my name, not Areeba, but Armin, spoken somewhere behind me. My stomach lurched. I turned slightly, scanning the room, and my eyes landed on a figure I recognized instantly. Emma. She was standing near the doorway, scanning the crowd, her brow furrowed as if searching for someone. My breath caught, and my mind raced. She shouldn't be here. She didn't know about any of this. I took a half step back, instinctively moving behind Samira, but it was too late. Emma's gaze found mine. For a long, tense moment, we just stared at each other. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock, and then something else I couldn't read. She started toward me. Samira moved slightly, placing herself between us just enough to slow Emma's approach, greeting her warmly, as though nothing were amiss. Emma glanced from her to me, her eyes narrowing. "What is going on here?" she asked, her voice low but firm. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Samira's smile never wavered as she said, "We're simply helping Armin and Areeba find a part of themselves they've been hiding." Emma's eyes widened, and I could see the questions stacking up behind them. She looked at me again, and I felt a flush rise in my cheeks. Samira suggested we step outside for some air, and before I could protest, she was guiding both of us toward a quieter corner of the garden. The cool night air felt sharp against my skin after the warmth inside. Emma folded her arms, studying me. "Is this some kind of joke?" she asked finally. I shook my head, my voice unsteady as I told her it wasn't. That I didn't even know how it had started, but that once it had, I couldn't stop feeling different. Samira stood nearby, silent but watchful. Emma's expression softened slightly, though there was still tension in her shoulders. "You look, I don't know," she began, then shook her head. "Different. Happy, maybe?" I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. We stood there for a moment, the three of us in an uneasy triangle, until Samira broke the silence. "Emma, I think you've known for a long time that Armin wasn't entirely comfortable in the box the world put him in. This is just giving him room to breathe." Emma glanced at me again, then sighed. "I don't know what this means for us," she said, "but I want to understand." That night, after Emma left, Samira poured me a glass of water and told me I'd handled it well. She said this was only the beginning, that there were still layers of myself I hadn't seen yet. I went to bed feeling both drained and oddly lighter, as though a piece of the weight I'd been carrying had been set down. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of dressing, practicing voice modulation, learning the subtle cues of presentation. Samira pushed me gently but firmly, correcting my posture, encouraging more natural movements. She even had me help her with small errands in town, always in my Areeba persona. Each outing felt like walking a tightrope, but each time I returned without incident, a small thrill bloomed inside me. Then, one afternoon, while I was in the middle of trying on a new dress Samira had altered for me, there was a sharp knock at the door. We weren't expecting anyone. She motioned for me to stay put and went to answer. I heard muffled voices, then the sound of the door closing. She returned with a thoughtful look on her face. "That was your landlord," she said quietly. "He's looking for you, something about your apartment." My stomach tightened. If he had seen me like this, if he suspected anything. But before I could spiral further, Samira placed a hand on my arm. "Maybe it's time you stop running from these moments. Maybe it's time you decide who you want to be in front of everyone." Her words hung in the air like a dare. I knew what she meant, and the thought both terrified and exhilarated me. That night, as I looked at my reflection dressed in a deep blue skirt, my makeup light but precise, the wig styled perfectly, I wondered if she was right. Maybe I wasn't Armin pretending to be Areeba, anymore. Maybe I was Areeba, trying to remember who Armin used to be. I was still thinking about it when I heard another knock, louder this time, and Samira's voice calling from downstairs. Areeba, you better come down here. They want to see you. My heart pounded as I moved toward the staircase, every step heavier than the last, until I saw who was waiting in the foyer, and my breath stopped completely. The air between us hung heavy after that, every word I wanted to say sticking in my throat. She was still watching me, eyes scanning me in a way that made me feel both exposed and seen. My reflection in the mirror wasn't the boy I had been clinging to in my mind. It was someone softer, more put together, like the clothes and makeup were slowly reshaping the way I held myself. She stepped closer, brushing a stray hair from my cheek, her fingers lingering just a second too long. "You're doing better than you think," she whispered, and I couldn't tell if it was encouragement or a warning. My phone buzzed on the counter, breaking the moment, but when I saw the name on the screen, my stomach dropped. It was her friend, the one who had been there that first night, the one who had laughed but also taken a photo I thought I'd never see again. I ignored the call, but the sound seemed to echo in my head. She noticed. "You should answer," she said, but I shook my head. She tilted her head, almost smirking. "You can't hide forever. Not from them. And not from yourself." I didn't know which scared me more, the idea of them finding out what I'd become, or the thought that maybe, deep down, I wanted them to. The lights in the room seemed softer now, maybe because my eyes had adjusted, or maybe because my mind was beginning to surrender to the reality I was in. She had changed my clothes, my hair, my face, but the bigger change was creeping into my thoughts. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw less of the boy I used to be, and more of the image she seemed determined to create. She stood behind me, brushing out a small knot in my hair, and I felt the gentle pull. The brush made the way her fingers occasionally grazed the back of my neck. It was a strange comfort, one I couldn't explain. "You see, this isn't so bad," she murmured, and her eyes met mine in the mirror. I swallowed and tried to think of something to say, but nothing came. She didn't seem to mind. She just smiled, like she already knew my silence meant agreement. She asked me to stand up, and I did without even thinking. She brought a pair of shoes from the corner. They were small, delicate, with a little heel. I hesitated, my eyes locked on them, but she gave me a look that made my legs move before my brain decided anything. Once they were on, I noticed how they changed my walk. Every step was different, slower, more deliberate. She guided me to the full-length mirror again, and I just stared, my mind trying to connect the person I saw with the person I felt like inside. The gap was closing, and I wasn't sure if I liked that or not. She began to take pictures with her phone, not asking, not warning me, just capturing moment after moment. Each click felt like it sealed another part of me into this version. She was building. Her hands adjusted my stance, tilted my chin, fixed my hair the way she wanted it. Her control over the image was total, and I was letting her do it. I should have been angry, but instead I was curious about what she saw in me that I didn't yet see myself. When she showed me the first picture, my breath caught. The person in the photo was poised, soft, almost elegant. I couldn't believe it was me. She tilted her head, waiting for me to say something, but I only nodded, unable to find my voice. She smiled wider and told me we were just getting started. I sat back down. She began opening drawers, pulling out jewelry. Little by little, my reflection changed again and again. Rings that caught the light, delicate bracelets that made the smallest movements look intentional, a thin chain around my neck with a pendant that rested just below my collarbone. Her hands lingered there for a moment, as if she wanted me to feel its weight. The atmosphere in the room had shifted from playful to something more serious, like we were crossing into territory that couldn't be easily reversed, and I knew deep down that each new addition, each adjustment she made was pulling me further into a role I didn't know how to step out of. She finally stepped back and told me to look again in the mirror. This time, I couldn't find a trace of the boy at all. My heart pounded, but not from fear. It was from something else, something I didn't have the courage to name yet. I turned toward her, ready to ask what she was planning next, but she was already holding something behind her back, something she clearly wanted to be a surprise. When she brought it forward, my breath caught again. It was a dress far more elaborate than the one I was wearing, layers of soft fabric, intricate details that made it look almost royal. She told me she had been saving this for the right moment, and she thought that moment had finally come. My hands trembled when I reached out to touch it. The fabric was cool, smooth, and far too beautiful for someone like me. I told her that, but she shook her head and said it would look perfect. She didn't ask me to change into it, she told me to, and her tone left no space for refusal. When I finally put it on. It felt heavier than I expected, as if the dress itself carried meaning I couldn't yet understand. She fixed every detail, making sure it fit exactly right, and when I turned toward the mirror this time, I almost stepped back from my own reflection, my breath quick, my eyes wide. I didn't look like someone playing dress-up anymore. I looked like someone who belonged in that image, as if the dress and the person were made for each other. She stepped closer, her voice low and steady now. "Do you see it?" she asked. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure if I was ready to admit that I did see it, and that scared me more than anything else so far. I stood frozen, my hands lightly clutching the sides of the dress, feeling the weight of it settle around me like it carried its own presence. Samira circled me slowly, her eyes assessing every angle, every curve, every line the fabric traced along my body. "You've changed more than you realize," she said softly, almost as if speaking to someone else in the room. I swallowed hard, my throat tight, because I knew she was right. It wasn't just the clothes, the makeup, the accessories. It was something deeper, a shift in how I carried myself, how I allowed myself to be seen. That night, as we sat in the quiet living room, she told me to look into the full-length mirror again, and this time, I didn't flinch. I could see the transformation in full, not just the reflection of a different body or face, but the emergence of something I hadn't admitted even to myself. "Areeba," she said, her voice both gentle and commanding. "This is who you are. Not who you were hiding, not who you think you're supposed to be. This is real, and you have a choice now: hide or embrace it." My pulse raced. The words weren't a demand, but a challenge, and I felt the truth behind them. The next morning, she had me practice walking, speaking, even small gestures, guiding me through a persona that now felt partially mine, partially her creation. Each correction, each adjustment was precise, deliberate, but never harsh. The thrill mingled with anxiety, and soon I realized I was learning not just how to look different, but how to inhabit a different self entirely. Then came the day she said we would go out in public. My heart pounded as I dressed in a flowing outfit. She had picked a soft lavender skirt paired with a fitted blouse and matching heels. My hands shook as I adjusted the collar, brushed the wig into place, and applied light makeup. She smiled at me, almost knowingly, and said, "It's time." Walking down the street, the wind tugged gently at my hair, and every sound, the chatter of people, the rumble of cars, the distant laughter of children, seemed amplified. I felt exposed, but not in the way I had feared. Instead, I felt alive, as if each step was teaching me something about who I could be. We stopped by a cafe, and she guided me to a seat, sitting across from me and watching intently. Inside, I caught glimpses of strangers' faces as they passed, sometimes curious, sometimes indifferent. One woman gave me a brief smile, and I returned it without hesitation. A surge of confidence, mixed with vulnerability, swept through me. Later, she asked if I was ready for the next stage. "Every part of this journey is about learning to exist as yourself in the world," she said. The words were simple, but their weight pressed heavily against my chest. That evening, when I returned home, Emma called again. Her voice trembled slightly, a mixture of concern and curiosity. I could feel the tension coil inside me, like a spring ready to snap. I spoke carefully, testing my voice, letting the softer tone Areeba had taught me slip naturally into conversation. She noticed, of course, and commented, "You sound different." I admitted that maybe I was, and there was a pause on the line, a silence that felt heavier than words. "I want to see you," she said finally. My stomach twisted. "Not like this," I wanted to say, but instead, I only nodded, unsure how to explain that I was no longer entirely the person I had been. The days that followed were a blend of preparation and anticipation. Samira guided me through each movement, each choice of dress, each expression. Every morning brought a new outfit, a new nuance, a new lesson in inhabiting a life I hadn't imagined. And every night, I lay awake, thinking of Emma, thinking of the moment when I would have to show her, thinking of the thrill and terror intertwined in the knowledge that the secret I had kept for so long was no longer fully mine to hide. Then came the evening of the gathering she had promised would be a test. My hands trembled slightly as I fastened the final clasp of a fitted dress, feeling its fabric hug me in a way that felt both foreign and intimate. Samira guided me to the mirror one last time, brushing a stray strand of hair back from my face. "Remember," she said softly, "you're ready. Whether you step in or retreat, this is who you are now." I took a deep breath, staring at the reflection of Areeba, and realized I was no longer afraid. The knock at the door came, sharp and echoing, and my heart leapt. I knew who it was without even looking. Emma's voice followed almost immediately, calling my name. I stepped forward, letting my heels click against the floor as I opened the door, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. She stood there, eyes wide, expression unreadable, and I felt the weight of everything I had become, everything I had hidden, pressing into that single heartbeat. Then she said, "Armin, is that really you?" I hesitated, then smiled softly. "No," I said, letting the truth settle between us. "This is Areeba." Her lips parted slightly in surprise, and I watched as her confusion gave way to something else: curiosity, acceptance, maybe even awe. And in that moment, I understood that the path I had walked, the transformation Samira had guided me through, was not just about clothes or makeup. It was about owning every part of myself, showing it to the person who mattered most, and discovering that who I truly was had always been waiting, just beneath the surface. I took her hand gently, feeling the warmth, and whispered, "I hope you can understand." Emma's eyes glimmered with a mixture of emotions, and she nodded slowly, a tentative smile breaking through. "I want to," she said. Later, as we sat together, the tension easing into quiet conversation, Samira watched from the doorway, her own expression unreadable but triumphant. I knew there would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt, fear of judgment, the constant negotiation of identity, but for the first time, I felt whole, visible, and seen. The final image of the night was my reflection in the mirror, Areeba staring back, poised, soft, unbroken, and ready for whatever came next. And as I turned away from that reflection, I knew that no matter what the world might think, I had finally become exactly who I was meant to be. At the end of the video, I'd smile at the camera and say, "Thank you for watching." If you want to see what happens next, make sure to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe. Who knows where this journey will take me, and maybe you next.